And I actually had quite a few people at the show be like, yeah, I saw your ad and I saw the piece say that, if we like this video, we'll like it. And so they came out so I actually got feedback on that at the show. So that was something that, because our videos were so dialed in and related directly to the copy, it really, I think, kind of got people to take a chance on at least RSVPing to it.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am your host, Jack McCarthy, and I'm super excited to be here today. We've got a really special episode. This is episode number 182, and ironically enough, this wasn't planned. I'm wearing a Blink-182 t-shirt. I don't know how this happens, but this is going to be a super exciting episode. We've got an awesome guest. We've got Mr. Ed Isola from the 502s, the frontman of the 502s, who is also an account manager at our IndieX Agency here. And we're going to be talking a lot about marketing tours and successfully marketing tours as live music opens back up in kind of the ever-changing landscape that we're living in these days. So Ed, welcome back to the podcast. Super pumped to have you.
Super pumped to be here. I am, first of all, excited to be back on the podcast. And second, super excited to be talking about live show promo.
Yeah, man, it's been a while since you've been on the show. I know the last time that you were on, I believe it was me, you, and Jesse, Basic Printer, talking about your album launches, and that was about it was almost a year ago now. It was back in September, I think.
Yeah, and we were talking about our launches back then, and there's been a little bit of time to kind of do some more testing and developing around different strategies since then. So excited to kind of dive into how that has set the base, so to speak, for the successful show promo that we've been doing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear what the band has been up to. I know you guys just got off a decently long run of shows, and just pumped to talk about it. Pumped to hear about what you were doing. And I know, live music has really just been opening up in the past few months as we kind of navigate this ever-changing COVID landscape. And I'm really excited to share with our listeners what you've been doing. So I'm just excited to dive into it. I've been kind of privileged enough to hear, bits and pieces as you were out on the road and hear about how ticket sales were going and things like that. But let's just dive right into it. Just to kind of give everybody some insight, let's let everybody know what kind of tour you were marketing, how it was going, how many shows you guys played, and, just kind of give a little bit of an overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 502s did a 24-day tour in June of 2021. So pretty recently, where we went and played 17 shows over the 24 days. And we left June 2nd. We got back June 26th, and it was fantastic. Show-wise, it was made up of a mix of hard ticket dates and soft ticket dates, which I think we'll dive into that, kind of the difference there in a little bit. But we started in Florida. We worked our way all the way up to Nebraska, went down to Texas, and then ultimately headed back over towards the East Coast and the Carolinas and came back home. So covered a lot of ground, covered a lot of shows, and covered a lot of good marketing as well.
That's awesome. So you mentioned something that I think we could just dive right into right away, is the different types of show deals that you guys had set up throughout that tour, and kind of how that, started to kickstart the marketing ideas that you had in mind when you started to promote. Tell us a little bit about what the arrangements that you had set up with the promoters and the booking agent and the venues that you guys were playing at.
Yeah, so it was crazy. Before we started really doing shows and I started doing the marketing for our shows, I really had no point of reference between a soft and hard ticket dates. Essentially what that means for anyone listening that doesn't quite know that yet, soft ticket dates are shows where a promoter says, hey, we'll pay you X amount to come and play the show. And that's not dependent on anything. So you show up, you play, you get paid that amount. Hard ticket dates are where you get paid based off of how many actual physical tickets you sell to the show. So that'll look something like, hey, okay, you get, 80% from $1 sold. So that's kind of the difference there. And this tour in June was made up of a mix of that. like I said, we did 17 shows over 24 days, and 6 of them were hard ticket dates. The rest were guarantees. So we had 11 guarantee shows and 6 hard ticket dates.
Gotcha. That's cool. Yeah, that's definitely, I think, like an important sort of starting point as we kind of dive into the marketing that you did to kick these shows off, because it had been a bit since you guys had done a long run. I know you had like a few strings of shows in the springtime, but this was really, going to be a big marketing push for you guys. What were some of the overall results before we get into the nitty gritty of what you did and why you did it and how you planned it all out and executed? What did you see from, just overall what you guys were doing from a marketing perspective to get people out to these shows? How did it turn out? What would you say about the tour now, kind of looking back, a few weeks past?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the tour as a whole was like super successful in terms of actual turnout and stuff like that. The 6 hard ticket dates that we did, all of those were profitable and they were new markets for us. So that was super exciting, going to 6 new markets and
wow,
and getting, it's cool to talk about this in a formalized setting, because like Jack kind of mentioned earlier, he was on the tail end of my 9 p.m. phone calls being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is working as well as it is, but that was one of the huge, like, most exciting parts of this whole thing, was that we went to 6 new cities where we'd never been before and made a profit on them, bringing out 100+ people to each of those shows. So that was a highlight. We used some of the tour marketing to sell out a 300 cap venue in Charleston, which was a highlight. And then overall, just the tour as a whole was successful. We were about plus 7,000 total net profit on the tour over the course of the month, which was unexpected in some ways and super cool as well.
That's incredible. That's really great, especially coming off, like not having toured for a bit in such a long stretch. Also, coming into this new sort of landscape of people going out to shows and stuff like that. I'm sure there was some sense of like, we don't know what this is going to look like, and it's kind of unpredictable. So I'm sure that, that probably played a role in how you guys were planning it. So just to get into it, let's talk a little bit about like, starting at the high level and then kind of get into the nitty gritty as much as you can. Like, what did the marketing efforts for this tour look like on the digital front? What were you guys kind of working towards? I'd love to, really just get a rundown on it and give people some insights.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to go through like all the campaigns kind of start to finish. As a starting point, what's really, I think, good to note is that, like I mentioned, we had the 11 kind of soft ticket dates and then the 6 hard ticket dates. So a lot of these successes on the hard ticket dates we were able to explore and try this marketing stuff because we had these guarantees that allowed us to kind of be out over the road for longer periods of time. So just something before people go out and kind of start diving into hard ticket dates is that, make sure you're setting yourself up. It's not a total risk reward nightmare. But
yeah, that's actually a really great point. That's a really great point. Like the way that you guys structured your tour and the kind of deals that you got as far as the shows that you were playing, it sounds like that was like risk aversion basically for you and allowed you to have the budget to explore what you wanted to for the dates where, you could turn a profit based on what you sold.
Yeah, it totally was. Like before we even went out on the road, you do your little plus minus kind of analysis on how things are going. And the tour was at break even based off the guarantees. So, before any merch, before anything related to the hard tickets, we were at a break even place, which was awesome because we, in our heads, it's like, okay, if we sell some merch and or if we have this budget we want to put towards the marketing, there wasn't really an opportunity to necessarily lose on that. I mean, we could have lost a little bit of money marketing the shows, but in the grand scheme of things, it was kind of like, let's try and see. So that's something to be aware of. And then you touched on also, like, it was interesting going into it, this being our first real tour in probably 18 months, give or take. There was obviously a little bit of nerves there. So
for sure, yeah.
That kind of set the table, so to speak, with like what was going on in terms of the atmosphere. So promotion wise, what we did was we ran no ads to the soft ticket dates. We only ran promotional efforts to the hard ticket dates, which to me kind of makes sense if you're going in and starting to plan. If someone's giving you a guarantee, oftentimes that's going to be, we did a couple of like, Saturday night concert series where there was a huge built-in crowd, kind of like evening sets, that kind of thing. If someone's giving you a guarantee, that typically implies that there's a crowd there and they don't, they're not too concerned about who you're bringing, rather they just want to have music. So we didn't really push those dates at all in terms of promotional efforts. What we did do is put together a pretty expansive marketing approach for the hard ticket dates. So as a real quick overview, and then we'll dive into the specifics of it, I think every hard ticket date we had set up, we went about 40 days out from the actual show date. We set up an event response campaign, and then that ran until 2 weeks before the show. And then we went and ran 3 weeks before the show. We started doing direct to ticket retargeting to our warm audience in the area. And then we switched that copy up 2 weeks out. And then we switched it up one more time the week of the show, kind of just saying like, hey, the show's in 3 weeks, the show's in 2 weeks, the show is this Sunday, that kind of thing. So those are the main kind of campaigns.
And these are all Facebook ads on Facebook and Instagram. Yep,
correct. Yeah, yep.
Cool. Yeah, so you were using the event responses objective to push people to the event page and try to get them to RSVP. It sounds like, and then just retargeting them with traffic campaigns. Did you have did you have the ability to track like with your Facebook pixel on sales pages, or were you guys primarily just working towards driving traffic and more awareness?
Yeah, traffic and awareness. We had no back-end pixel access. All of our tickets were sold.
Gotcha.
Through the venues, which, while not ideal, kind of had to make do with it. And we did event response campaigns, and then we just did straight traffic campaigns to the ticket links as the retargeting.
That's awesome. I have a question for you regarding, the tracking element of that. Since you didn't have the Facebook pixel access, and I mean, I know with iOS 14 changes and the Facebook ads platform, a lot of that might have been out the window anyway if you didn't own the domain name where the tickets were being sold. So I'm curious, how did you guys handle like tracking ticket sales and sort of estimating that as you went? Was it just communication with the venue owners? Did you have like spreadsheets that you were working with? How did that look?
Yeah, I mean, the venue owners were all really, really accessible, the ones that we were working with, which was cool. That was not something we knew going into it.
You guys are lucky.
Yeah, I've heard so, and it was a case where I just we set the show up and then I emailed them and said, hey, can you add me to ticketing advance, emails. So pretty much all of our ticketing counts came through automated emails, which was something I didn't know venues had. But if you're setting shows up and you're interested, a lot of times you can email the venue or the promoter and say, hey, can you add my email to, your ticket notification emails. And what that looked like for us on a lot of instances was, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every Friday, we would get an email saying like, here's how many tickets have been sold. Here's how much revenue's been generated per show. So that's actually something that a lot of venues have built into their back-end ticketing system that we relied heavily on for the actual tracking of the tickets. Because like you said, we couldn't see anywhere else. The only data we could see was link clicks in Ads Manager and number of event responses, but we couldn't see how many people actually went to the ticket page. We couldn't see how many people actually, add to cart or checked out and bought the tickets. So we relied heavily on these kind of venue produced ticket promotion, ticket count emails.
Gotcha. That's cool. I mean, I think that's definitely a good sort of point to take home that, like you said, you didn't know that was that kind of reporting was a thing or that was available, and maybe it wouldn't be available to everybody, but it is cool that, just asking for that opportunity might open up a door where if you're not able to track ticket sales through, a checkout on your own website or your own platform, you could have the opportunity to at least get some kind of sense of, what we're spending is making an impact here, even if I can't directly attribute it to, a sale or an add to cart or something like that. I think that a lot of indies and artists get hung up on that. Is like, oh, if I can't do it, like if I can't track perfectly, I'm just not going to bother, sending traffic there. And I don't necessarily think that that's always the right approach, especially if you've got budget, which it sounds like that's kind of what you guys were doing. It sounds like you were sort of working with like event response campaigns as sort of like your top and middle of funnel, and then kind of that creative retargeting as countdowns for like bottom of funnel work. I'm curious, what did, apart from like the campaign objectives here, what were you working with as far as the messaging on those campaigns, locally? What did that look like, from the ad copy and the creative side of things? I know you kind of clued me in a little bit, but I think this is sort of where it seemed like the rubber met the road for you guys.
Yeah, totally. So I do think that like the copy and the creative being really, really dialed in was a huge benefit in terms of this being so successful. Across the board, we were seeing event responses for 50 cents to $1 across all 6 of these markets, which is a good cost. So I think that was really good. And then link clicks, were about the same. They would vary from anywhere from like 20 cents to 50 cents, but in a small market, that was good. So I think that the point with that is that I think that having this copy really dialed in was super beneficial. And a lot of that stemmed from some customer avatar work that we actually did back last October when we launched our album on the album launch. And we just kind of reused that, honestly, man. Like we put a lot of time in then filling out, 10 customer avatars, give or take, and putting copy variants together for them. And so we took the best performing ones and we plugged it in here. So our copy was very dialed in. Things that we used on the event response, some of them were a little cheeky sometimes in a sense. Like one of the better performing ones was like the copy said, "Psst, I heard you're the type that likes a good time, winky face. You like to sing in the shower, in the car, and especially at every single concert." So kind of using that type of first 2 lines to kind of draw attention. And then from there, it was really straightforward call to action. Like, it's been a while since you've seen music. We know you miss it. We miss it too. We can change that together. Here's the details about the show. It's going to be super fun. Like, you should come out. And so that copy was really on brand for us, but it also paired really, really well with the video assets that we used. In terms of video creative, we used 3 of our best performing fan finder videos over the last couple of years. And we just paired that with the copy variants. We went strictly videos, and we had 4 different copy variants for event responses. And those things just really resonated well. Another little kind of thing that I think actually worked to our advantage was that at the end of the copy for the event responses, we would just straight up say like, okay, here's the intro piece of the copy. Here's the call to action. And P.S., everything you need to know about what the show is going to be like is in the below video. So if you like that, you'll probably like the show. And I actually had quite a few. Oh,
man, that's killer.
Yeah. And I actually had quite a few people at the show be like, yeah, I saw your ad and I saw the piece say that, if we like this video, we'll like it. And so they came out so I actually got feedback on that at the show. So that was something that, because our videos were so dialed in and related directly to the copy, it really, I think, kind of got people to take a chance on at least RSVPing to it.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Like something that I've kind of always believed in and kind of put out there when it comes to creating cool experiences for your live shows is like giving people a reason to want to come out to a show. And I think that's especially important right now when some people might be on the fence about going anywhere. But even, pre-pandemic times, I just think like, something I've often suggested is like have a theme around your shows, make it like a theme night or something like that. Or, people do album launch shows all the time. Giving people a reason more than just like, we're coming to your city and we want to see you. It sounds like you guys really leaned into that in your copy, knowing so much about what your fans are about, having a good time, dancing and, just kind of partying it up. I know that's very much like on brand for the 502s. It sounds like you really leaned into that. And then connecting it back to the creative in the copy, I think that was such a good move. Like just saying like, hey, if this video looked like a blast to you, then like you're going to want to be here. That's so cool.
Right. And like, so, and it worked really well for us. And what was cool about it was that it's so on brand. Someone that's listening to this might think like, oh, well, our videos aren't like super fun and, folky like what 502s are doing. May not work for us. But I think what the main takeaway really was from this is dialing the copy into the audience. So if you're a singer-songwriter, like, you could, or whatever, that's just a way stripped down version of what we're doing. But you could pivot that and say like, it's been a while since we've been able to actually connect and like share intimate musical moments. Like I've got good lyrics. You guys should come check it out.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be a peaceful moment. And so like what we try to do is just think about like, what do we want to feel at the show? What do we want people to feel at the show? And then just say that in the copy. So it's like that was what the customer avatar stuff I think did really well for us, was allow us to dial in and say, all right, here's the things that are important to us and important to our fans. And if you look at our copy for these shows, there's probably 10 lines of copy before we even mention that we're actually coming to the city. It was never like, come see us play. It was like opening line, we haven't seen music, blah, blah, blah. By the way, we're coming to your town. So it's like the sell was happening because it just sounded fun. And then you get to the info that, oh, you're actually coming to Greenville, Right.
Yeah. It sounds like you were like really leaning in on like trying to paint a picture and bring a narrative into the audience's mind before you even mentioned, we're going to be here and we're going to be doing exactly, the thing that we're going to try to evoke the feelings that we're giving you in this ad experience. I think that's so killer and so smart.
Totally. The other thing I'll add related to the copy is that we, in addition to kind of saying like, oh, check out the video below, that's what you want to see. We also used copy that essentially was like, hey, this show is going to be fantastic and unbelievably awesome. We guarantee that, and y'all aren't going to want to miss this. So if you're comfortable, and confident that your live show is going to deliver that kind of experience, and or not hesitant of negative feedback if people come to the show and hate it, that was something that I think also kind of got people's interest. It was risky, but like we felt really confident in our show that like, oh, if we can get them there, people will enjoy this because we enjoy it. And so we did work that in as well. And I think that kind of fed into it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great. Like you guys are like experienced live, and touring musicians. You've spent a lot of time playing shows. You spent a lot of time on stages and really honing that portion of your music business. So being able to sort of brag on that a little bit and being like, this is going to be like nothing you've ever experienced before. It's a risky kind of gutsy thing to say, but it sounds like it really panned out and caught people's attention. I'm curious, and what I wanted to sort of dive into here is to talk about the traffic and the traffic temperatures that you guys targeted for these shows. I know you're kind of as a band, you've been running ads and growing your audience over the past number of years online, and I've kind of gotten into a threshold where you've gotten into like cold traffic targeting, which we talked about in that episode where we talked about your album launch. I think that was episode 147. I'll link to that in the show notes so that you guys can check it out. But I wanted to talk about what you were doing for, getting your warm audience and warming up new audiences for these shows. What did that look like in your ad campaigns?
Yeah. So in terms of the event responses, we used that as our top of funnel kind of awareness for these new markets. We did a very, very small test run of this back in April for two shows actually. And we realized with the show promo that spending, $300 on fan finder traffic for this show and then retargeting that warm audience with event responses, it wasn't working for us. And it's worked for our clients at IndieX, but it wasn't working for us in particular. So we just kind of went, we just went, it wasn't working for us in the sense that it was generating results, but they were more expensive than we were looking for them to be in order to get enough tickets sold to have the venue at the capacity that we wanted to. So that kind of just spurred us to say, okay, well, what if we try cold traffic? And we had some success with that for the whole Camp Feels Good thing last October. And so the audiences that we really just started running to, we would go, we'd set up a campaign for event responses to warm audience in an area and spend $50-$60 there just to make sure we caught those people in the event responses. But then the bulk of where we were spending money for each show was cold event responses. Just an event response campaign set up to cold traffic. If the market was available and had like the DMA, we would use that. If not, we would just go 50 miles around. And then our audience that we targeted was just lookalikes of everything. Customer list, email list, page engagement on both Instagram and Facebook, video views, leads, and then event response lookalike as well.
That's super interesting. So you weren't doing cold interest targeting. You were going after lookalike audiences of your existing assets, which I think that's super, super interesting. Just from like the zeroing in on a local area and using lookalikes. You guys obviously have a ton of data. So, and I imagine you've probably run traffic to these lookalikes before. So there might even be a case where some of the people in them, have been exposed to you guys. That's super interesting though. How did that pan out between the cold and warm traffic?
Yeah. And so also just to add to that, we had the lookalikes and then we narrowed them by interests. So it was like this lookalike narrowed down type of
Very
thing
cool.
that was going on. But it looked good. I mean, the cold traffic event responses were getting, on general, a better cost per event response than the warm traffic. I think that cold traffic event responses was about 50 to 75, 80 cents per event response. And it would go up over the course of the month and a half that we were running event responses, or 5 weeks. But they usually maxed out around 80 cents per event response. Warm traffic would start around 50 cents, and then it would grow really quickly to kind of go over $1 to trending towards $1.50. So that's where we realized, okay, let's spend $50 on warm and let's leave it there. So cold was really, really effective in that manner.
That's super interesting. How much? So it sounds to me like, and we were kind of running through this as you were building the campaigns and working on them, but it sounds to me like you were really able to kind of bake in what we would call, like introduction stage or top of funnel in these event response campaigns to cold traffic by what you were doing with your copy and creative. In terms of like, a conversion rate, what were you guys seeing number of event responses versus like people, like butts in the seat? What did that typically look like? I know it's not like a perfect tracking mechanism, but I'm curious if you've got any data on that. I know you've got some pretty massive spreadsheets. I wish you guys could see them. They're wild.
Yeah. I did set up some tracking, but it varied between anywhere, I would say, from number of event responses, like 20 to 40% event responses to actual tickets sold would be,
Gotcha.
a loose,
okay, cool.
a loose metric, but something to at least kind of gauge off of.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So what recommendation would you give, a lot of times like cold traffic targeting, especially for something like live shows, I feel like it can become a sticking point for a lot of artists, especially if they're, getting into new markets for the first time, or they're going out on the road, and they haven't really like gotten their road legs yet, or, they just don't have a big audience yet. What are some recommendations that you might give like to bands or artists that are feeling like, or wondering, is that the right thing for me to do right now? Am I at a place where it makes sense to do this? Where is that kind of threshold? You guys have been, testing a lot of things and obviously been building your audience. So I'm curious what your take on this would be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, like you said, we've been building our digital marketing and online infrastructure since 2017. So that's about 4 years. I think we started August 2017, so about 4 years exactly. So there's some level of familiarity with people that are seeing our ads. And there was time to build up these video assets, right? Like the assets that we were running, we had the laundry room video, which has over 1 million views. We were running Feels Good to Be Me video, which is like on the porch, which has over, I think, 2 million views on Facebook. And then we were running this video for Magdalene that went viral on TikTok last year. So kind of like when does it make sense for a band to try this stuff out? We had built this stuff up over the last 4 years where we have these really strong assets that we can run and that people are kind of familiar with in some degree. So that was really important. And we also had the budget, and we also had the ability to go out and do this in a way that wasn't going to just, if it didn't work, we were going to be in major, major trouble, you know? So in terms of when does it actually make, and I'm very risk averse. So that was very important to me. Like Jack mentioned, I had this spreadsheet that's like, 8 tabs long about projections that I was trying to just see what we could whatever we could glean from it. So it's like, if you're going to go out and do this, start it on a small scale, right? Right now we're talking about this 24-day tour with these 6 hard ticket dates that went really well. But the kind of start of that was in April when we went and did 2 shows that were 4 hours away, and we spent $300 on each. So worst case scenario, if nobody showed up, we lose $600, which was something we were comfortable with. So, start small.
Right.
Like, try it with one city.
Now, were those 2 shows in April hard ticket dates as well?
They were, yeah. So in April, we were just like, okay, we want to try this marketing out, right? And we set up a show in Charleston. We set up a show in Charlotte, and they were hard ticket. It was like, 80% from $1 or something like that. And so that kind of spurred the testing of this, and it worked. And then we said, okay, well, we're doing this tour in June. We should try 5 or 6 more of those and see if they go as well. So it was very experimental. This could have easily gone the other way, but if you're starting to go out touring, or if you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, that's awesome, I'm just going to set up some event responses and go out and do A, B, and C. I would say look at where you're at first as a band, but also as a band when it comes to digital marketing. Do you have video assets? Because we ran 3 videos, and every market kind of responded differently, I noticed, to different videos. So having that variation of videos was really important in there. And not only just having variations of videos, having variations of videos that have been tested over the last 4 years and have been proven to be really great kind of top of funnel introduction style videos. Like Jack said, we kind of compressed the intro stage into this event response campaign. And I think that was because we had the copy dialed in, but also because we had these videos that, like I said, we've tested for years, and we know that they're going to work pretty well. So we were throwing like our best copy, our best creative, everything that we had the best of, we were putting it into these campaigns. So, make sure you have the assets, you have the copy, you know who your customers are, and that you kind of have some level of credibility in that regard before you go out and just slap this together in a month and a half and then it doesn't work and, you're strung out monetarily. The preparation, I think, is something Jack and I kept coming back to as we were talking about this, and that was very, very important for why this worked as well as it did for us.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, you guys have been testing creative assets and really dialing in what your brand is. And I hate to use that word because it kind of comes off as, it can come off as vague or sort of amorphous, like know your brand. But you guys have data that backs up this is the kind of content that our people like, and this is what resonates with us as artists. and it works, within the context of our music as well. So using that on like a, international level where you've, run traffic to just grow your fan base in general, taking, those lessons learned and making the most of what you've done so far, it sounds like that had such a massive impact. I'm curious. So you were trying to break into 2 new markets in April, and then you mentioned it was 5 new markets in this most recent run that you guys did. What kind of resulted from that? I'm curious. How did that look? These are places that you've never been to before.
Right. Yeah. So we had the 5 new markets, and then we had the additional hard ticket date, which was kind of us revisiting one of the shows we had done in April. So in terms of the 5 new markets, just a quick rundown. We went to Kansas City, we went to Austin, we went to New Orleans, we went to Nashville, and we went to Greenville, South Carolina. We had been to Nashville once, but never really for our own hard ticket show. So nothing notable, and we'd never been to the other cities at all. So nothing there in terms of historic kind of crowds or anything like that. We had no draw. Result-wise, Kansas City, we sold 103 tickets, and total show plus minus was plus about 300. Austin, we sold 91 tickets, made about $100 on that show. New Orleans, we sold 50 tickets. That was about plus $400. And that was also on a Tuesday night, which was, I noticed, Tuesdays and Sundays are not the best nights for show promo. Who would have thought? Nashville, there was about 148 sold, and that was a plus 900. Greenville, we sold 114 tickets. That was plus 600. So those were the 5 hard ticket dates and kind of what the overall plus minus was, which takes into account, our payout plus our merchandise, less our ad spend, less the booking fee percentage.
Gotcha. That's cool. And thanks for being so transparent with everybody about like what the numbers were looking like. Cause it's rare that you get a look into like that kind of granular data. And I kind of want to underscore here, like these are markets that you guys had never been to before.
Yeah.
So that's wild. Like a lot of artists, they go out on tour and they go to places that they've never played, and, they'll get on a bill with local bands or local artists that can draw, and, maybe they don't, or maybe they do. And maybe it's a break even night at best, but oftentimes it's a wash. At least in a lot of stories that I've been told over the years here. So that's nuts. That's crazy. How did that, in terms of like the sentiment that you guys felt being, in a room with these, either people that have been fans of your band for a while or new fans, what was that like? I mean, I'm asking because I know you mentioned like people at your shows specifically asked you like, or specifically said things to you about like your ad creatives and stuff like that. I'm curious, like what was the overall sort of like feeling at these shows?
I mean, it was awesome. And, you look at some of these things like where it's like, okay, a lot of these shows, the profit on the show came from the merchandise sales. So a lot of our show payout versus our ad spend was break even. And so that kind of implies the fact that if we're making, all of our profit off the merchandise, people were having a good time at the shows. But the general sentiment was just like people were happy to be back in music, seeing live music, and tied in directly to it comes back to our copy, like tied back into our copy. It was very positive copy. It was very happy music. And so a lot of people were just there to have a good time. They were hanging out with their friends, smiling, laughing, enjoying the show. And there was a couple of people that had heard of us before that, had seen us on TikTok or our ads previously or on our email list. But 80-90% of the people at these shows were from these ads. And so it was not uncommon for us to kind of be at the merch stand after and for people to come up and be like, I didn't know you guys. And like, I just said, I'm going to take a chance. These guys seem cool and the music sounds fun and I'm going to go, and like, holy cow, this was fantastic. I can't wait for you to come back.
Wow.
So the sentiment was really cool. It was awesome, man. And like, what I think was even cooler was that I just kind of said, we spent $500 on a show. We got paid $500. You're break even, right? You make a little money on the merchandise there, profit wise. But what I think is really cool and kind of promising is that, like you said, this was our first time in these cities. And now we have people in the cities that we have their emails. We got the emails from all these shows. We probably got 50 to 100 emails in every show, in every city now. And we have people in these cities that are excited about the 502s and are going to want to come back. So this very first trial run to me was really like an investment into those markets, where if we going into it's like, if we can break even on the show, that's a huge win, because now you can go back to Kansas City and Austin and New Orleans and Nashville and Greenville and bring more people, because you got a base there now. You've got people that know you. They'll bring their friends. And it's like that kind of probably leads into something we're going to touch on later, which is in Charleston, where we actually did go back and visit it again after 3 months. And the results there were even cooler. But the sentiment was awesome. And the kind of promise for returns to those cities is the most exciting thing, because you'd have people at the show who everyone was dancing and vibing. Now you go back, they might know the words next time. And you're not just someone that they're taking a flyer on. It's like they're excited to go see you play.
Man, I love that point that you just made about like how you were viewing going into these markets and running traffic and really pushing your marketing on these new markets as an investment into those markets. Like specifically, like I'm investing into building a fan base in these markets. And then you built up your email list doing this, and you drove sales once people were actually in the door, which is wild. Like that's kind of a crazy affirming point to like the experience that they were having. It kind of reminded me of something you said. We put a video out a couple weeks ago on our YouTube channel. I'll link to it in the show notes, kind of detailing some of the touring experiences that you guys had when you came to Nashville. And some of the team was able to hang out. But you said something in there about like how oftentimes like you recommend bands don't tour. And so like that kind of juxtaposed with how you're saying, I viewed a lot of this as an investment into this market. I just want to like chase that idea a little bit. I think that's a really cool concept that a lot of people don't talk about. It's like we go on tour to try and quote unquote make it, but you're going on tour and saying like, I'm investing essentially.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's always a weird thing to sit and say like, maybe touring's not the thing to do for you right now. But my exposure to music and music marketing was the first thing I ever did for the 502s was the Fan Finder with Cirque back in 2017. And it was just like, holy cow, there's no way we could go on the road, away from everything and everyone that we love and get these results. And so it's like this delayed gratification thing where this was our 6th tour, and this probably could have been, our first tour. If you're looking at a strictly business perspective, right? Like you go and do live shows because it's fun and you want to, and all those things. But if you're looking at like a profitable tour and that kind of stuff, this was the first one that really had a huge positive impact, both with bringing people to the show and monetarily being profitable. So, I think that's like, again, like I just used the phrase delayed gratification, but you're looking at it as, a lot of people look at it as, let me go out and let me beat my head into the ground for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years and build a fan base. And I think that, first of all, touring is not that comfortable, right? Like it's not necessarily the most glamorous thing of all time.
No,
it's like there's more comfortable ways to do that. And I'm not trying to bash on anyone that tours. I just went on a month-long tour. It's just being smart about it. Where you said I used the phrase investment, where it's like we're going out to build these markets and we have a goal. The goal is to now go back to Kansas City and bring 250 people. And that feels reachable because our goal going the first time was to bring 50 to 100 people, right? And like we We collected their emails.
Right.
We talked to every single person there. Every night we were staying for like an hour to an hour and a half right after the show, selling merchandise, talking to people, making sure everybody felt super welcome. Like, you walk off the stage, you go right to the merch booth and you talk to every single person. That kind of like old school, shake all the hands, make sure everyone feels really welcome kind of fan engagement.
Yeah.
It is something that not to be undersold, I think, too. But yeah, I mean, if you're going out touring and you're just starting and your goal with it is to make a lot of money, that's a very difficult goal. The money comes later down the line, and or what people probably really care about is the attendance, right? Like the attendance comes down the line, where you have put this investment time into going and building and kind of accumulating fans. Because something I've always been told with playing live shows, the general idea behind it is you go to the city, you play, you come back, you play to more people, you come back, you play to more people. And it's that cycle, right? Until you have a fan base and you can go sell hundreds of tickets in every city. So this is that philosophy, but done digitally, where you don't have to go play an empty bar and then come back and play to 7 people. It's like we were fortunate enough to go play to 100 people in each of these cities, So it's just a different spin on what the traditional booking philosophy is.
That's such a good point. Like you guys through your process of doing so much putting so much into your digital infrastructure, and I'm not just talking about in terms of like monetary, like you guys have literally put blood, sweat, and tears into your online presence in the form of the content that you've created and just the presence that you've built up as a band. Over time, that's kind of allowed you to, I don't want to say skip the whole play to no one stage, but you've strategically kind of set it up so that you didn't have to. And I think that that's really, really good to note. It doesn't cut out touring altogether, clearly, because you just did.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I kind of said, well, this probably could have been our first tour, right? We've done 5 other ones. This is in hindsight where I'm looking back being like, you know what? We did go do some tours where there was a couple shows, more than a couple shows probably, where it was a very small crowd, 5 people. It's like, that probably wasn't the best use of our time or our resources. Right. In the moment, you don't think about that. But looking back, it's like, yeah, we didn't need to do that. We didn't really gain anything from it. You live and you learn, but
right.
It's kind of like when you're going out to tour, you want to make sure you're making the most of it. Just kind of a quick tangent onto the fan engagement type stuff. And what Jack was just saying was about you've built out all this infrastructure. We went to the shows, we were sending emails, and we'll touch on this in a second about the Charleston thing. We were sending, show announcement emails, but something that I think we got a lot of really positive feedback on was at the end of every show, we would get the emails from the promoter. We'd immediately put them into the next day, we'd put them into our drip. And then we had pre-built out thank you flows for every city that essentially said hey, thank you for coming to the show. It was awesome. We cannot wait to be back. Just a general thank you. And then I waited a few days and kind of said if they were not in our opt-in offer already, it made that opt-in offer to them. So we had that kind of back end piece running.
Dude, that's bomb.
Yeah. We came up with that idea on the road. We're like, man, it'd be nice if we could send somebody a thank you email. And then we just built it out while we were out there for every city. So, that was cool. And then the other thing we built out was we ran reach ads after the show for 4 days, maybe $20, $30 a show, to the cities being Nashville, Thursday was awesome. We cannot wait to come back. Thank you so much for coming out. Just targeting our warm audience. And so to me, that felt like it leaves the door open to come back, where people, it's this full relationship, right? People came, they were unsure. We met them. They had a good time, put a name to the face. And then you get this email follow-up thank you series paired with ads. And it's this full cycle, this good customer kind of experience, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, it's really leaning into the buddy system pretty heavily. awareness happening, affirmation happening for some people who just don't know you guys. Maybe their first purchase with you was was coming to your show, which is wild because we usually talk about shows being an ascension type product, buying merch at the show and then nurturing them after the fact. I just think that that's bomb. Like that's such a cool funnel that you guys put into place. That's incredible. Really, really cool.
Yeah, it was cool, and a lot of it kind of just came out of necessity. Like, oh dang, we need this. Let's do it real quick. And then it's like, oh, okay, that worked. And just thinking about what we would want as a fan if we received it.
I think it's interesting and worth underscoring here that, what every piece of the marketing for these shows was really intentional for you guys. Even when you were coming up with things on the fly, it wasn't just a matter of like, oh, we'll throw up some ads, with whatever copy about how we're coming to town and that'll be it. Like all of this was super, super intentional, from, the ad copy to the creatives to the type of targeting that you were doing and the audiences that you were targeting, down to what you were doing at the shows, probably the merch you were selling, and then, the post-show kind of nurturing experience that you created. All of that was super, super intentional, which I think is just, it kind of underscores again, like, how this isn't just like one magic bullet that you can do to sell out shows. Like sell out shows, you guys were really putting in a lot of effort and hard work. And so I want to kind of touch on, the philosophy that you were saying about building upon markets, and talk about that Charleston kind of date in April that you did and how you built upon that for this past tour that just happened in June. What did that look like? Let's unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was my, favorite show of the June tour was the Charleston one, purely because I couldn't believe it went as well as it really did, to be honest. So kind of starting, we touched on this a little bit, but the hard ticket promo in June was really kind of motivated by this little test run of 2 shows that we did in April of 2020 in Charleston and Charlotte. So back in April, we went up to Charleston and Charlotte, and the Charleston show, we ran the exact kind of sequence that we just went through for these other 5 cities, where we ran event responses, and then we did the 3 weeks of retargeting, and that was kind of what our system was like. And so we did that in Charleston in April. And then we had this last date on our tour was Charleston in June. And ad spend wise, April, I think we spent about $500 on the show. June, I think we spent about another $500 on the show. So a couple months separated. But now we're going back to Charleston, and we've got 50 emails in the city. We've got a lot of warm audience, and it felt like we had this kind of platform that we could build upon and have the show go better. So in April, we sold, I think, about 140 tickets. And then in Charleston in June, we sold about 310 to 340. The doorman said he stopped counting. So, 300 plus tickets.
It's a good problem to have.
It was cool because, the show's about to start, and I walk over and I was like, hey man, how are the tickets looking? Because it looked full, but I was curious. He goes, well, my thing says that we've sold, 370 tickets, and I've refunded like 40 because people couldn't actually see the stage and the venue anymore. And I think there was 40 people in there before the show started. So we ended up with about, I think, 300 plus paid tickets, and there was probably about 370 people at the show. And that's crazy, right? I think a couple of things contributed to that. First to note is this was not a market, like I was saying, that we had any huge base in. We had done one previous show in Charleston in April, and that was our first real show there, and we brought 140 people. So now we came back and we brought 310. 310 was the number of tickets sold. I just looked at it. Brought 310 people plus. And I think a couple of things contributed to that. First, you're coming back April, May, June, 3 months later, give or take, 2.5, 3 months later. And we adjusted the copy, right? Like the approach was the same the second time where we did the event responses and we did the retargeting. But what we added to it this time was emails, because we had 50 emails from April. So we sent out probably 5 or 6 emails starting about 6 weeks out saying like, hey, we're coming. Here's a reminder. Shows in 3 weeks, shows in 2 weeks, shows this week. The show is literally today. If you haven't got your ticket, like you should get it and or come out. So we did that differently this time. We adjusted all of our copy to say, Charleston, oh my gosh, April was insane. You guys sold this show out and we're coming back. Charleston's starting to feel like home, and kind of just leaned into these things that felt very real to us. So we're running all that. And then the last piece that we added, which I know you want to dive into, and I do too, we start thinking about like, hey, how can we expand this marketing and make it better? So you've got what I call like the core marketing principle here, which is the event responses and the target retargeting. And then we added the emails in to people from April. But then the other piece we put into place here was this free plus shipping and handling funnel for fans. And that went really well too. We ended up picking up I think 250 emails at about $1 per email. And the idea behind that funnel was it was crazy. I mean, we were like watching this over weeks, and I know you were looking at it too with me. And it's just like, I can't believe that the cost per email is holding this steady, for 250 people. And it's like, now we've got almost 300 emails on our list from Charleston. So next time we go back there, it's like, that's 300 people that are aware now that we're coming. And which speaks to the importance of data collection, right? But without going down that rabbit hole, we ran this free plus shipping and handling funnel. and the funnel, the message was essentially like, Charleston, we're coming back. And, we know that this is only our second show here. And we just want you guys to have a good time and get to know our music. So if you RSVP at this link, you can buy your ticket at the door. That was one thing to note. This venue only had tickets at the door. So that was kind of where this came from. It was like, you get your ticket at your door, but if you RSVP, we'll have a signed CD waiting for you at the show, totally free of charge as our welcome to the family gift. And a lot of people RSVP'd for it. And that's the only time we've tested that so far, but we'll definitely be expanding on that in the future.
That's bomb. So you had a sign up page for that was your free plus shipping and handling funnel. There was really no shipping and handling. It sounds like it was just sign up to this. It was like a free if you RSVP kind of funnel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I call it free plus shipping and handling, but like what you said, it wasn't. It was like RSVP and we'll give you this thing for free at the show. So there's no checkout. It was just name, email. We set it up to tag them as Charleston. And as soon as they opted in through that form, we put them in the email reminder flows, right? And so we had a dedicated flow for them that said, hey, your free CD is going to be at the show. Make sure you come grab it on this date. And we reminded them all the way up to the day of the show. And tons of people came out. And I think we only had about 60 or 70 people actually come claim the CD, but we still sold 300 plus tickets.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's super cool. That's kind of like an old school thing, I think back to long ago playing shows, like an album release show, for example, a lot of bands and artists would be like, oh, you get my new record with your ticket purchase. You guys essentially did that, but it was less of you get my new album. And it was more of we want to give you a gift when you show up. So this is how you get in. I think that's so cool. Such an interesting, neat little spin on a free plus shipping and handling funnel. That's so cool. It's cool that you used the whole system that you were using for marketing these shows in Charleston and kind of included that special offer element. I think that's an interesting approach as well and a creative way to kind of expand upon what you're doing. That's really cool. So something for everybody to think about for sure.
And it was cool, right? And the other thing was it wasn't like a profit killer. where if somebody, the only way they got this thing, we're paying $1 per email. So, cost us $250 to get 250 emails. And then the only way anybody got this ticket, or rather the only way anyone got this CD for free was if they came and bought, a $12 ticket. And so it wasn't anything like any kind of huge expense either, which was what was really attractive about it, because it wasn't like we were off. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, if they pay us $1, we'll take $1 less per CD. So again, I was very risk averse in the sense that if it works, cool, there's a lot of upside. If it doesn't, then it didn't. And it cost us $250.
Right. Yeah. Man, that's so cool. That's such a cool little way to, I think, cap off the tour with like what it sounds like was your most exciting show.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, and this is the last thing I want to touch on, just as far as like recommendations that you might give indies on budgeting. I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but in terms of your ads and how you kind of structured the marketing spend as a whole, based on, your projections of these shows, alongside like the guaranteed shows, what would you recommend to indies who are, thinking about undertaking this kind of campaign structure, in terms of like just general budgeting, and then like what you would spend on, that initial sort of event response campaign. And if you guys are interested and you don't know how event response campaigns work and you want to check that out, we have a training inside of our Indie Pro library that you can find at indiepreneur.io, selling tickets for live shows training, where we go over how to build these types of campaigns. So if you're curious and you're like, I don't know what these guys are talking about all throughout this episode, you could check it out there. But I'm curious, like, in addition to like just kind of, high level budgeting strategy, also nitty gritty, like what you were spending on event responses versus retargeting and what you might recommend.
Yeah, totally. So for each of these shows, we spent about $500 on average. Some were $300, some were $600, $700, but the average across them was $500.
Gotcha.
So if you're going to go out and do this, you need to plan it out, right? Like it all comes back to the planning. And in this instance, it's just basic financial accounting of like, which is like, oh, maybe I don't know financial accounting, but it's just common sense of like, what do I stand to make versus what could I spend, right? So really what I did was I opened up a Google Drive sheet and I put down, okay, here's the show date for the hard tickets. Here's the location. Here's the venue. Here's what our offer is, right? So every show did not have the same offer. One of them was 60% after $50. One of them was 80% from $1. So I got all of the hard ticket offers. I put them into the spreadsheet and looked at that. I wrote down the capacity of the venue. I wrote down the ticket price. I wrote down what the total revenue was. And these were all, as I'm listening, these were all individual columns that I just filled out and then used formulas. So if you're trying to follow along with what I'm saying, you can just make each of these a column in your Google Drive sheet and then calculate it out. So you get show date, location, venue, offer, capacity, ticket price, total revenue, potential, which is your capacity versus the times the ticket price, right? Like how many people can come versus what they'd pay. And then you do your percentage cut, which is, okay, if your offer's 80% from $1 and your total revenue is $1,000, then you just go 1,000 times 80% from $1. So you just do a little math there to figure out what you stand to make. That's what this whole exercise is about, is like, if I sell this venue out, what do I stand to make at this show? And then alternatively say, okay, what do I think, if I sell 50 tickets, what do I stand to make? And once you have that, what do I stand to make number, that's where I pulled the recommended ad spend from. So I said, okay, if I think I'm going to sell 50 tickets and I stand to make a profit of, on the show of $500, then I was comfortable because we were not dependent on these shows to help pad the tour out. That's again where not relying on this allows you to be a little bit more pushy with like experimenting. I would say I would take 80%, 70, 80% of whatever our max potential was and put that into the ads. So, it's like, okay, we stand to make $500 profit from this particular show. I'm going to spend $400 on it. And that 100 padding was just a preference because, like I said, risk averse much as possible. So there's not, I guess the point is, right, like look at your show and look at your details and what your offer is. There's no like, oh, you should go spend this much. What I will say is that I did not see more spend equal more positive benefits. There was one show where we spent $1,000 on the promo, and the results there were the same as a couple other cities where we spent $500-$600. So it seems like
that's really interesting.
Right. So it seems like you can't just dump money into a show and have it go well. You kind of have to put in like $500-$600 max is what I was seeing. And then you can go back a couple months later and spend another $500 or $600. But that's kind of like an asterisk mark to that, where if you're like, well, I got $2,000 and I want to sell at this show, that may not work. I mean, that's my one point of reference, but it did not work for us that way.
That's super interesting because, that's oftentimes what people look to do. It's like, oh, I've got, this much liquidity in money that I can spend in budget. And they try to like crunch imaginary numbers with regards to like conversion rates and how many butts in the seat. But with breaking into new markets, you guys didn't have that experience. It wasn't like that. So that's really interesting. And I think an important note to take down is like set your budget accordingly, but keep it reasonable, knowing that because you're going into a new market, there are more unexpecteds than there are, controls.
Yeah. And I always like to look at it, right, as like, what is the worst case scenario? So for us, our target going into these cities was the hard ticket dates. Can we sell 50 tickets? And that was just like a benchmark that we had set for ourselves. Like, can we sell 50 tickets in these cities? That would be really cool if we could. So a lot of our projections were based around 50 tickets sold. And we got 50 tickets sold. How much could we spend if we sell tickets? So ultimately you're looking at what do we stand to make versus, or rather, what can we stand to make directly informs what you can stand to spend on the show promotion.
Totally. That's awesome, man. And congratulations again. I know I've said it multiple times now over the past couple of weeks on how well this tour went. I think what's really cool about it is you have all this data now, which hopefully will give you negotiating power on future shows to land more guarantees and be able to pass from the hard ticket sales into more of like a soft ticket sale territory.
Yeah.
That's the power of owning this data, or at least one more piece of power to owning this data.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at doing another tour later this year and going back to Charleston, going back to Greenville, going back to Kansas City and Nashville. And it's like, this was very experimental. And now we're having the conversation with venues and our booking agents where it's like, hey, look, we're going to spend $500 promotion on the show, so we need a good deal. And there's a lot of pushback on that right at first, but it's like, well, look, we're going to reinvest what we're going to stand to make at the show. And we just did this, and we're coming back to Greenville where we sold 115 tickets. So that gets back to the investment side of it, right? Like you have to be on I struggle to say you have to be on the bad end of the deal, but you're not going to be on the best possible deal going to a city for the first time. Like Jack just said,
right.
When you go back to the city and you can say, hey, we sold 115 tickets last time at $15 per ticket, a venue is going to take you more seriously. They're going to give you a better deal. They're going to give you some marketing budget potentially. So you got to invest in it, both on the ad front, but also from the intangibles of going out to the show and building this goodwill within the actual city to prove that people are going to come. Nobody wants to back somebody that doesn't have a hard kind of proof, good or bad. So it's that investment all around.
For sure. Oh man, it's so good. And like, we'll have to do a follow-up, episode in the future. The next time you guys go out on the road and hear how you double another market, and sell out a bunch more shows. This was super, super fun. And I really appreciate you coming on. I'm sure everybody is going to get a ton of great info and ideas from everything that you just shared. So thank you for joining us for this episode. It was so fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me on. And like I said, it was cool to dive in and talk about this stuff in a more formalized manner outside of the 9 p.m. phone call. So hopefully everyone gets some good takeaways as touring comes back.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's awesome, man. Thanks so much for digging in. Indies, thanks for being here. This was a blast of an episode, and I'm excited to see what comes next for the 502s and everything that Ed's doing. It's really cool to take this stuff and not only see you guys kick butt with it, so definitely take some of these lessons learned from Ed and put them into your own show marketing as shows start opening up again. Definitely looking forward to seeing what everybody's going to do with their live show marketing as this world kind of continues to evolve. So get at it. This was a blast of an episode. We will catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, Indies.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast.